Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, as a crafter, I tend to store things away for a time when I think that I will need them. And I have been doing that with these two different types of bubble wrap. This large bubble wrap here is super fun, but you can see that some of them are actually flat. So clearly the children have got to them first. And then the other bubble wrap I have is just the normal sized one. And I want to use these today, and I'm going to show you the technique right through to the finished card as well. Now, because I wasn't sure how these would stamp or anything, I am going to pop these in a stamping platform. However, you could always just leave them flat on your desk and then press your paper down into them once you had inked if you didn't want to use a stamping platform as well. Now, I didn't want to cut down this piece of bubble wrap because there were already some little bubbles that were deflated. So I did use my Tim Holtz stamping platform, which is kind of the biggest one that I have. And then I have put a little bit of double-sided tape on the back here, and this came off my stamping platform just fine. I use this all the time, so make sure that you use a tape that you know you can get off again without struggling, but just whatever works. I'm pressing it down lightly onto the lid, and then if I was smart about it, I probably would have used the rubber side when you turn the lid over in the Tim Holtz stamping platform. However, it worked just fine, and I was able to stamp this no problem at all, just on the clear cling stamp side. I'm going to use some Midnight Snack to ink up this piece of paper here, and because I didn't know how big I wanted my card or anything, I just used a bigger piece of paper than what I would need, and I just was experimenting to see how this would go. And when I pull it up, I love the texture that the bubble wrap gives, and I love these giant big bubbles. But I did feel like there was a whole lot of spaces missing. So I'm moving it up, lining it up, and then I am going to stamp again using the same ink. And then some of these bubbles will kind of end up getting double the ink and a little bit darker. But that's okay with me because it fills in some of the gaps as well. So I really love this piece here, and I have kept this bubble wrap. I'm not giving it up. I just gave it a wipe off with a damp cloth, and then I will keep it for next time as well. So I love this simple background. It is very cool. So it's fun to have a look around the house and see what you can find to use, because it's fun and it's a little bit different. So I was really enjoying myself playing with this. I made lots of backgrounds, and then I'm moving on to the normal sized bubble wrap now. So this is just kind of the smaller one, and I'm doing the exact same process with some double-sided tape. I found that I didn't need to make sure that all of it was perfectly covered. It adhered and it stayed down really nicely. Again, I'm going to use just a bigger piece of paper than I need, and I'm using some Distress Oxide Vintage Photo, so a nice brown colour. And I actually have a little bit of foam underneath my piece of paper there as well, because this bubble wrap is thinner than what a cling stamp would be. So I stamped down once, and then I was thinking about how I could kind of keep some of that colour but make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to dry this because it is an oxide ink, and then you can see that I'm gently moving it up just ever so slightly. Then I am going to stamp again in some Hero Arts Unicorn Pigment ink, and this is going to dull down some of the brown just a little bit, because at the moment it's quite a bold background, and for what I was thinking, I just needed it to be toned down just ever so slightly. So I am actually going to heat emboss this as well. So the pigment ink will stay nice and wet for long enough that I'm able to do that. And then I press down with some nice even pressure, and it's a little bit hard for you guys to see, but because I offset it, and then I'm going to add some clear embossing powder to the top here. This is the Ranger Superfine embossing powder, and you will kind of be able to see where there's a darker part that the white didn't get, the white pigment ink didn't get, because I shifted it up just a little bit. So I know it's kind of hard to see, but hopefully later on in some of the photos as well, you'll get a really nice view of that. So I'm using my heat gun to melt all of that embossing powder, and again, this piece was way bigger than what I needed, but I end up using it for a few different things, so it was just as well that I stamped bigger than what I was anticipating. So it's got a really nice shine to it as well, and this will also create a resist for what I'm going to do next. So I have gone with some kind of different colours for me today. I'm going with the brown and I'm going to add Victorian velvet on top. Now I use this Victorian velvet colour much more than I ever thought I would, and I'm going to add it on top of the brown, and here's where you can see that offset stamping really come to life. So you can see that it kind of stays white and clear, and the brown is trapped underneath my embossing powder, so I've trapped a little bit of that, and then it has that nice kind of vintagey pink on top, which just changes up the colour of the background altogether. So I really like this. Now remember, when you use the emboss resist technique, that you need to mop up some of that ink that gets trapped on top of the embossing powder. So I just run a dry cloth over top and it will pick up all of that excess ink which is sitting on top of your embossing. And it still has that really gorgeous shine. You can see that white offset, so I was really happy with the results. Now for this part here, I'm going to cut it down, and I am aiming for the bit that has kind of all the dots there so that the background is a little bit uniform. It's the control freak within coming out, and I am just going to cut it down to be 4 by 5¼ inches because it will go on a 4¼ by 5½ inch card base. Now here is a butterfly die, and I don't have an outline die for it, but I want one. So what I'm doing is I am tracing around it with a pen, any pen at all. And I am going to cut this out just with some scissors. Obviously I'm going to go just inside of the black line because I don't want that to be on my project, but this way it gives me a base for my butterfly that is slightly larger than the die and also solid, because I didn't have a solid die that went around the outside, or a shadow die for this butterfly. So I'm just going to quickly fussy cut around the outside, and then with the actual die of the butterfly I am going to die cut that in vellum, and this will go over top as an overlay for my butterfly. So I always say this with my dies and things, you definitely have to make them work for you, and even though I didn't have what I needed, this makes it and changes it up a little bit so that I can make it work for my project. So I've got my vellum and my background there ready to go. Then I'm going to use this Altenew stamp set, which is a favourite of mine because the variation in sentiments is wide and I love that. There's such a good range. This is the Heartfelt Sentiments stamp set, and I'm going to stamp out a couple of these in some VersaFine Onyx black ink, and these will be my sentiments. I will trim them up just into a nice little fine strip, and we'll be away laughing with the sentiments too. Now, because both of my backgrounds in these cards, I'm going to make 2 finished cards for you today, just so that you can see how to use each of these backgrounds. They are pretty busy, so I'm going to have a little vellum oval here. However, the oval was too big and kind of too long, so I die cut it once out normally. Then I'm going to shift the die down a little bit and then run it back through my die cutting machine, and this way it will take off the top of the oval at the moment. And then I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to shift my die up, and so that I have got a little bit off the bottom. So I've just turned it upside down here, but I'm going to do the same on this end, and then that way my oval is kind of more round and not quite so tall, and it just worked a little bit better with my project. So even though I didn't have the right size oval die, I definitely made it work, and that looked much better in my opinion. So once I had my oval die, I also die cut out a couple of pieces of foliage, and I'm going to do that in a plain white cardstock because I already have lots of colours going on with the butterfly and the background, and I didn't need to bring in any more at all. So I'm just going to use some liquid glue on the vellum, and I'll hide this again in a moment when I decorate the butterfly's body, but I'll pop it down right onto that background there, and the wings will kind of pop up a little bit because they are in vellum. Now everything is ready just to put together, which is super easy. I'll add some liquid glue onto my background and pop it down onto my card base. That way I can wiggle it about and get it in exactly the right place. Then I will pop on my vellum oval, and the adhesive that I use to hide this will be hidden by the butterfly. So I am going to make sure that any adhesive I put is behind, otherwise you'll be able to see it through. If you'd like to avoid that and you just want to glue down your whole vellum oval, then you just add a sheet of adhesive, like double-sided adhesive sheets, to the entire back of the vellum before you die cut it, and then that way you don't have to worry about hiding adhesive at all. But sometimes I quite like the look of the vellum not being entirely entirely adhered down to the page as well, and kind of coming up a little bit so that it just gives it a little bit of dimension. So it's up to you whatever you are looking for in your project. Now I'm putting my butterfly at a little angle, and you can see this is where I'm going to hide all the glue that holds down the vellum, and pop it kind of up to the left a little bit. You could definitely center this just as much, but I will pop the sentiment down the bottom right and it will balance out the card nicely. I'm adding a few little pieces of the white foliage just here and there. You can die cut any foliage that you have in your stash, anything would work really well here. And I'll just quickly mention, if you guys have created any craft projects and things using bubble wrap, I would love to see them. I love getting creative with different products, so join my Facebook group. Now the link is down below, and you can post all of the pictures and everything there. We have an amazing group of people. They are very, very supportive and super encouraging, so we would love to see your projects that you have created with bubble wrap. I've got my sentiment down just nice and flat because the card already has lots of dimension here. And again, just to tie in that nice blue color, I'm going to add some Nouveau drops down the body of the butterfly, and it also covers that little bit of adhesive that we use to adhere the vellum to the background of the butterfly too. So that is card number 1 finished, and we are going to move on to card number 2. So the other card is made with the same background that I made the first butterfly, and to get this butterfly here I used the same technique. I just drew around the butterfly die with a pen and then cut it out. This one I'm using the Midnight Snack color, and I am ink blending onto it. Because the pattern in the background paper that we made is busy enough, I didn't want to bring any more patterns into the butterfly, so I'm just ink blending, and I'm purposely going heavier around the edges and then lighter in towards the center. And I'm able to do that when I use a finger dobber, which is my favorite thing to ink blend when I'm doing smaller spaces. And again, I've die cut out the same butterfly, but actually with the vellum, and I'll pop it down the center, same as the previous butterfly. I cut off its antennae with the blue one, and it's just got the vellum antennae. Now here it is. I'm going to pop this one down as well. Now this one I had to do slightly smaller because I took a chunk out of my background when I created the first butterfly. So this one is cut down to be 3 3/4 by 5 inches, and it just leaves a nice white bigger border around the outside, which I love as well. And then I'm pretty much going to do the same thing, except for instead of an oval here, I'm just going to have a nice strip down the center. So either works really well. If you don't have oval dies or circle dies or rectangle dies or any decorative die that you would like to make the vellum out of, then just put a simple strip down the center and it looks just as good in my opinion. So again, hiding the adhesive behind where the butterfly will go, and then a really similar kind of layout as the first one, but it looks different because of the colors that we have used. So this was really fun. I really enjoyed this project, and it's fun to kind of look around and find things that you can create patterns with and see how they turn out. And it doesn't always work out, but when it does, it's really fun, and I enjoy that part of crafting. So this project today was really fun for me, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I had my daughter alongside. She was busy stamping out sheets of them, and she was loving it too. So it was something nice that we could do together. Now back to finishing off this card, I have popped up this sentiment on some foam tape, and I'm going to put it right across the bottom there. It stretches right from one side to the other of the pattern paper, and then adding the foliage in, just tucking it behind the butterfly so that you can't see those ends. I'm using the same blue, which matches that Midnight Snack color really well, and I will have everything linked down in the description box below in case you're interested in checking out any of the products that I used today. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video. As I said, it was really fun to create, and you can see the 2 different cards here side by side, and although they have very similar layouts, they still look, the outcome was kind of quite different on both of them. So thank you so much for joining me, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks, bye!